It's Cerise here, one of the hosts of the Soul Soothing podcast, where we explore the calm, intelligent side of ambition, helping women business owners to settle their minds, simplify their lives, systematize their businesses, build their support, and scale their income with integrity. This episode is brought to you by our parent company, the Soul Soothing Co., where we help women founders build AI-enhanced systems and self-managing teams that restore spaciousness, flow, and creative freedom. I am joined today by Michelle McKenzie, who is a purpose-driven leader who's helped move over 120 million in catalytic capital to fuel entrepreneurship and growth. She is the host of Where's the Funding, WTF, podcast, where she dives deep into conversations about equity, inclusion, and the courage it takes to build when the odds are stacked against you. As an angel investor, venture partner at Newly, executive coach, and creator of the Unbreakable Founder, Michelle helps founders lead with heart, resilience, and unshakable clarity. Michelle, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Cerise. Thank you so much for having me.
It is a pleasure. So I would love to jump in and get a little bit about your background with Empowering Insights.
So to start, my background is in international development and in development finance. And I've done that for about 17 years. And in the past few years, the past 3 years or so, I've ventured into the coaching, executive coaching and career coaching space, which is what led me to start Empowering Insights. And I was still in my international development career until earlier this year when that whole sector pretty much got tanked when the agency that I worked for, USAID, got decimated and is no more. And so this was an opportunity to move into my coaching career in a more full-time capacity. So, I'm someone who's had to do the things that I walk other people through in terms of how to pivot and to pivot into purpose.
Absolutely. Really important and powerful thing to be able to guide from that personal experience. So you mentioned Unbreakable Founder. So tell me a little bit more about that.
So the Unbreakable Founder is a leadership development program that I'm developing. I'm taking all of my experience working with entrepreneurs, mainly on the African continent, but entrepreneurs here in the US as well, and really looking at the softer side of entrepreneurship and leadership. Because oftentimes when especially scalable type ventures, they get into incubators or accelerators, and a lot of the focus is on financial models and building the business, but not enough focus on how to build the founders themselves, how to help them scale their inner game, their psychology in order to be the leaders that they need to be to scale a company.
You are speaking my language. We at a Soul Soothing Co. believe in that 100%. So I'm curious, what draws you to work with primarily entrepreneurs on the continent of Africa?
Because that's where most of my work was in international development. For most of my career, I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Niger, West Africa, and then I did Peace Corps response in Mozambique. And then most of my career has been across Africa, West Africa, Central, Southern, East, so most of Sub-Saharan Africa. And so those were the entrepreneurs that we worked with, that we funded, that we provided capacity support to. And so I've had the opportunity and advice. And so had the opportunity to work with many of them closely, providing advisory services and key home into that as a key need.
Amazing. So from my understanding, Africa is really starting to make big leaps and bounds in business development. There's a lot of young emerging talent that's happening. So can you tell me a little bit about your experiences and observations in that?
Yes. So it's really helping founders to really understand. So let me back up and say, as a coach, I'm bringing my coaching hat on, my coaching perspective, but also understanding the entrepreneurship landscape, and sort of bringing those two things together to look at the founder themselves. Because most accelerators, as I mentioned, they focus on building the business. Very little attention, if any, is given to leadership development and helping those founders to build themselves and to understand their psychology and how they lead, bringing into focus things like emotional intelligence, critical communication skills. How are you handling? So, Africa is a very dynamic continent. And if you can be a successful entrepreneur there, you can be a successful entrepreneur anywhere because you're having to deal with lots of different types of risks and issues that in most circumstances it's not even a consideration. And so if you have to navigate through all of that, so there's a lot that is going on with a person that could create a lot of tension and a lot of frustration. And so really understanding as a leader, managing all of that and then managing to lead. And then looking at things like, okay, going from 0 to 1, you start off, it's just you're starting a small venture, and then you get funding. And now you're starting to onboard people. And there is a path. You can no longer do everything that you were doing as one or a few, because now you're too many and things need to change. And oftentimes people don't make that bend when they get to that place that is now different than where they started, right? Now you're bringing people on. Now, what is your role? Your role is now different than when you were the doer. So it's really focusing on moving from doer to leader. How are you setting up others to then be of assistance to you so you can focus on different levels of tasks that are now needed? And I also see when this is an important one, not being able to let go of certain ideas and let go of certain
Mm,
things, right? And sometimes it's things like that can really impact an ability, a leader's ability to really scale, realizing that there are certain things that you might have conceived it one way, but what's required now is something different. And you have to think differently, you have to act differently, and how to bring others along on that journey that you're taking them on, and making sure that they are a very informed part of that process and that you're leading them with clarity so that they know where you are going. Not just you taking off and leaving everybody else behind, making sure that there's a lot of clarity for the entire team.
that's a really important part. And I think in business culture as a whole, it's a lesson that could be better absorbed because we look at these major corporations out there in the world that leave their teams behind and everybody is scrambling to catch up. So that's a really valuable lesson for entrepreneurs to learn from the beginning. What are some of the ways that you would talk through that with somebody that's struggling to let go of, the control that they, because we all have these ideas and directions that we expect things to go, and nothing is ever linear. So
Mhm.
how do you help your clients through that?
Thinking about, well, what's at the root of it? Is it a trust issue? Right? Is it a competence issue or is it a trust issue? Is your team competent enough? Because it's a competent issue, then you can train your team, right? And you take the time
Mm-hmm.
to explain and show and document and all of that. And then sometimes it might not be a competence issue because that can be solved with proper training. If it's a trust issue, then that's something else. And do you have reasons not to trust them, or is it just a you thing where you don't trust
Mm-hmm.
that others can do things at the same capacity or the same level as you? And that it might not be done well if it wasn't done exactly the way you would have done it, because
Mm-hmm.
that type of behavior cannot be scaled.
100% agree. And that's, I think, a really big challenge. And I would almost love to add in another layer is the trust of themselves to be the type of leader that is capable of guiding a team. And and I know certainly here in American culture, there's a lot of projection about that. The leader will project not trusting the team when it's really a deep core issue on their part.
Yeah, and this cuts across because now we're not talking about continental differences and things. We're just talking about as humans, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How humans behave and trust in your team because the team must also learn to trust themselves, and it's harder for the team to trust themselves if they don't have the trust of the leader, right?
100%. Yeah.
Because trust inspires confidence. And
Mm-hmm.
then also building trust in your team, having your team trust you, you trust in them, having your investors trust you, having their trust, because that's a really important part as well. Because at the early stages, the founder or the founders are as much the product as the product itself, right? Especially when they're looking for funding. Because oftentimes, if it's so early, there isn't that much to show in terms of, revenues or whatever, where this is going. And sometimes it's just about the person in front of you. How
Mm-hmm.
are you showing up as a trustworthy person? How do you build trust with people that you're in relationship with so that they can feel that you are the person that they want to invest large sums of money in and that you have the capacity, not just as a technical person, if it's a technical type of business, right? Or the talent or whatever it is, versus somebody who can actually lead other people and make this a successful venture.
That's a really huge point, especially when you're starting to pull in venture capitalism and the amount of weight and responsibility that, especially a new entrepreneur is going to feel in that type of situation. So, how how do you define trust in business and how do you teach them to understand how to be a trustworthy person in business?
Do what you say you're going to do. Be consistent. Be consistent. Consistency is a major part of building trust.
Mm-hmm.
That if you say you're going to do something, you do it. If you're going to fall short of doing it, you communicate. So communication is a major part of building trust. You have to always be clear in your communication. And part of what we integrate into the Unbreakable Founder is crucial communication. So it's communication in general, also crucial communications, communicating when the stakes are high. If you're going to miss, let's say, a product launch or something, or you have some bad news to communicate to your investor or to your board, how are you going about that communication process? Are you waiting until the last minute, until things get really, really bad to say, oh, we have a problem, or are you communicating early and often?
I absolutely love that. And I personally believe that if you have those two things in place, your chances of success, those are the foundations of success. Certainly there are businesses and business owners that kind of luck into success without those things, but that's what keeps customers and collaborators coming back for sure.
Absolutely. Trust, you can never have too much trust. You can have too little trust, but you can have too much of it.
I love that. So, where did the inspiration for Unbreakable Founder come from?
Just from having spent a lot of time in that space working with entrepreneurs and realizing that there isn't much of a focus on just building the person. And I have this one case where I had a friend who was running a business and this person, they got investment and they were starting to grow and starting to bring on staff and sort of remembered how this person struggled a bit in terms of leading others, expecting that just because you hired a person to do a certain task that they should just know exactly how to do it the way you want them to do it because
Mm,
that's their title without providing any clear standard operating procedures or explaining how things need to be done because that person was doing all of those tasks, him or herself, right? Before, and now someone comes in and there's just not enough information that was provided and being very frustrated with everyone. And I'm like, well, if you're frustrated with everyone, maybe the problem is you. right? Maybe you're not providing enough information. Maybe you're not providing enough coaching. Maybe you're not providing enough guidance. Is everything clearly written out, right? When you're the one doing a lot of these things and a lot of information is tacit versus things that are clearly, you have your clear standard operating procedures and everything is documented and everyone knows what to do. Have you done all those things? Because if you're still sort of in that very early stage, that might not yet be the case, and that might need to be the thing that you do to then get everyone on board and provide them with that clarity in terms of how they behave and perform. If you have those things in place and you're still struggling, then it might be another issue. Maybe you're not hiring the right people.
Mhm, mhm. Absolutely. I love that. A little side note, our entire team, we are all horsewomen. And we were just joking earlier today that life with horses sets you up for success with entrepreneurship, especially when you train horses. There's a saying that goes around in our circles, clarity is kindness. And that to me is the essence of all relationships, be it interpersonal, professional, interspecies, what have you. Clarity is kindness. And I would posit that the ultimate clarity has to originate from yourself before it can translate to anybody else.
Absolutely agree. Absolutely about clarity being kindness because I've been in situations where things were not clear and it did not feel kind because you are left to try and fill in the pieces. And if the person who is supposed to be providing that information is either unaware that there are gaps and there are gaps in their communication posture and how they share information, and you're just sort of left to struggle, especially if that person or those people that are the ones responsible for providing the clarity are not very approachable,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
In terms of understanding what you need in order to perform well and to be successful. And so having leaders be just more self-aware, awareness of self and awareness of others in terms of the teams that they're leading, and so that they can manage those relationships better.
Absolutely. So I'd love to get your thoughts on the importance of empathy in business.
I think it's crucial. And I don't think it's the weakness of Western civilization. Let's just be clear on that. I think it's very much needed. And in the world that we're living in right now, we need a lot more empathy. And empathy needs to be a built-in part of business. And I get this confusion when I talk about empathy and entrepreneurship, where people think that you can't be empathetic and also still be a strong leader or a strong boss,
Mm-hmm.
and that you can't manage with empathy. Well, if I'm kind to them, how do they know I'm serious? And I'm like, no, being serious and being unkind are not necessarily the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
They
Mm-hmm.
can take you seriously if you're clear in your posture, if you're clear in your communication, you've provided them the clarity that they need, and you provide the boundaries. And if somebody is not operating in accordance with the guidelines or with the boundaries, you 100% hold them accountable. It doesn't mean that you can't be empathetic. If, and this is another thing about empathy and also leading with curiosity, which is another thing that
Mm-hmm.
gets people confused about what that is. And I use this example. Let's say your team is not meeting their deadlines on sales project, whatever it is it's supposed to be. And instead of just being upset that they're not performing, lead with curiosity to find out, well, what's behind it, right? Speak to them either individually or as a team because different people might have different friction points, right? And find out what's behind it because maybe it's not something relating to people's individual performance. It might be something more structural in your workflow or in your operating procedures. And it's through that curiosity, trying to understand, well, why is this happening, that you can uncover some of those issues. But if you're just going in guns blazing, you're not performing, we had these tasks, you didn't do this, you didn't do that, but understand the why. And you can get much further with that.
Absolutely. And that leads me to another thought is personal accountability, because the why may end up being something that the leader is accountable for, right?
That is the key piece, because at the end of the day, the problem could just be you or something that you're responsible for that you have not done.
hmm
And that's the key piece of being curious. Because, and it's also the upsetting piece. You might
hmm
find out that you're the bottleneck, you're the problem. But guess what? It's an opportunity for you to evolve and be better at how you lead and how you communicate, how you interact, all of those things. And that's where the growth comes in, right? Because all of this is to make you a better leader so that you can lead your team to the type of success that you're trying to move towards.
Absolutely. And so to me, it sounds like that's maybe the root of what you help your clients with is how to be accountable to oneself in order to be able to lead.
Absolutely. It starts with self accountability. And that's why self awareness is such a big part of
hmm
it, right?
hmm
You must first be aware of awareness of self, and then awareness of others, awareness of the situation, and then how you manage your relationships with your team and all of the other stakeholders who are a part of making your business work.
Amazing. So when somebody signs up with you in the Unbreakable Founders program, what is your framework? What are the steps that you guide them through from enrolling to successful completion?
So, first, enrollment, and going from the first module is going from doer to leader, going through that whole process of letting go, not being the person that's the bottleneck on everything, that all decisions have to come through, how you move forward, start bringing in other people, give them responsibility, building trust. Also, how you build credibility, as I mentioned before, with your investors, if you have a board, people on your board. And then we go through the communication piece of it. If you work with a co-founder, um, what is your relationship? How are you managing friction in those relationships? Friction that you might have with investors or boards, communicating when things aren't going well. How are you making sure that if things aren't going well, how are you addressing that with your team? And then moving into things that are more about how do you move forward? How are you thinking about, as you scale, even potentially down the road, looking at before we get there, your communication cadence. How often
Mm,
are you doing things? Feedback loops. So
hmm
communication is a big part of it, as you see. So it's how you communicate crucially, also getting feedback loops, making sure that at every stage of growth, you're keeping the communication channels going, and then looking at you as a leader. Now, how are you thinking about potentially as the business grows? You have to think about the future and your exit strategy and also managing failure. How are you
mm,
using that as a strategy for growth? How are you taking and how are you using that to pivot? Because in any business that's growing, being able to pivot and to come back again using that information as an opportunity to grow and cycling that knowledge back into the business, or if a line of thought or how you would initially position the business, if that's not working, how are you then stepping back and looking at the big picture and doing it with the team and be like, hey, this isn't quite working the way that we thought it was going to be. how do we now decide how to move forward? What can we take from what hasn't worked, and how can we build on it better and move in a different direction? And providing opportunities and case studies where others have done that. So if they find themselves in a situation, and also using their own experience, because if they've gotten to this point, they have failed at something and they've had to pivot at something, and how they've used those experiences to build better and to build forward.
Mm-hmm. That is such a key component to entrepreneurship because everybody fails. And I'd love to talk a little bit more about, the types of lessons that you can learn from failure. For me, one of the biggest things is if you haven't failed, you haven't tried anything, and I don't remember who it was that I heard say this, but actually, it was one of my riding coaches. And she said, imagine if a toddler tried to start walking, fell down, and went, nope, not for me.
Yep. Because nothing is linear,
Mm-hmm.
right? You don't, most people don't start a business and then, whoops, it's that hockey stick to success. There's a lot of iteration. Sometimes you try, you're like, okay, well, this is not the pathway. Let's go back to the drawing board. We made some assumptions that were not correct. It didn't pan out with the market because they say most businesses fail because of product market fit. So, okay, that didn't work. Are we just going to stop? Or are we going to go back to the drawing board and figure out, well, what didn't fit? What were the assumptions that we made that didn't pan out? Right? And a part of being an entrepreneur is being a risk taker and being someone who doesn't give up. So you've had those experiences already. How are you using them to propel you forward and realizing that in your journey, you're going to have lots of pivot points that are coming up. But also, how quickly are you making decisions about whether to pivot or not? Because sometimes it's about staying too long on the path that you're on instead of pivoting, hoping that it'll work out instead of taking the information that you're getting that is not working and say, okay, let's put a pause and let's figure out how do we move forward and using the information that we have and figure out what the market's telling us. If it's not a good fit, why? Maybe
Mm-hmm.
we should switch market or something else.
It takes a lot of emotional resiliency and the ability, and this is something that we teach our clients, is it's the ability to respond rather than react in situations like that. And that takes a rather flexible nervous system that modern culture doesn't always condition us to have. So, what are your thoughts on handling that resiliency and developing that resiliency?
So resilience is your ability to respond when things aren't going the way that you thought they would. And the first step in that process is to just have a pause. Just pause and gather information. What's happening? What's the information that I have? How can I use that information to move forward? We're in a time right now where a lot of people are pivoting for one reason or the other. If you're in business and there's so many things happening right now, let's say, for instance, tariffs, and tariffs might drive up your cost for a particular thing that you were importing. You're going to have to think about what do I do now?
Mm-hmm.
What information do I have about this particular product? Can I source it somewhere else for cheaper? Can I substitute a different product that will give me the same quality of what I was using it for? So you have to start thinking outside of the box and being really creative because this thing is happening. There's nothing you can do about it because things
Mm-hmm.
happen all the time that are outside of your control, that are macroeconomic. and it's just happening. And instead of just reacting, you respond, right? What can I do with the information that I have? The information I have, this thing is happening. It might likely increase my costs. Where can I cut costs? Maybe if not in this area, but maybe somewhere else to cover these increased costs. So it's really just taking a pause and really thinking deeply about what is it that you're dealing with and what do you have at your disposal in terms of the decisions that you can make. Because if something's happening that you can control, you focus on the things you can't control, focus on the things that are within your locus of control. You can try and reduce prices somewhere, your costs somewhere else. You can try to look to source differently. Those are things that you can control and you focus on that.
Absolutely. And that, you know, the power of the pause in essentially any situation, but especially in business, I think is huge and oftentimes highly overlooked. You hear, like, given how unstable the economy is and people reacting to market fluctuations or tariffs and things like that, the ability to have that moment to pause and to really reflect and to do so from a place of strategic intelligence is, I think, probably
And
one
not
of the,
emotions.
yes, exactly, and not emotions. And I think, especially for solopreneurs and small business owners, that can be such a huge change because your business is your baby, at least in the beginning.
Mhm.
Eventually that baby grows up and you get venture capital and you bring on partners and things like that, and it starts to become a teenager and an adult and leave the nest a little bit. But
But even then, it's still hard to let them go.
yes, yeah, exactly. So I'd love to hear your thoughts because our audience is primarily a women-based audience, and we focus on helping women. What are some of the things that you think women bring to the table as strengths that are hugely underrated?
Just the ability to think, to multitask,
Mm.
and to think on multiple planes. I'll give you an example. I was just watching a video of a mom with triplets, and she was out by herself navigating three babies. And the level of thinking and planning that has to go into a task like that. And she had it. She had these little carriers. And if you weren't a woman, you just wouldn't even be able to think to think through that whole process without a complete meltdown. So women's ability to think about so many different things because we exist in so many planes, not just as career women, but as career women, we still have a home life, right? And
Mhm.
other responsibilities out of our jobs that we have to think about. So be able to navigate all of these different spaces and think about all of these different things that need to be done all at the same time, I think is a super strength.
Absolutely. I would also posit, at least we are culturally encouraged to show more empathy,
Absolutely.
um, to and this one's a little bit of an either or. Some women are more comfortable with vulnerability and the accountability and or the vulnerability that comes with accountability. Um, but I think that those things are probably some of the things that actually make women exceptional leaders when they have the confidence to step into that authority and to set clear boundaries and to take leadership on their shoulders.
I I couldn't have said it better. I absolutely agree.
So I'd love to hear your thoughts on something that you might say to a woman that is thinking about becoming an entrepreneur, but is feeling overwhelmed. Say she's got this idea that has been burning in the back of her head, but she's been putting the brakes on.
First, I would like to know, why is she putting the brakes on? Is it fear? Is it feeling as if she doesn't have enough information? She doesn't know enough? Because women, we tend to do that to ourselves. We always think we need to, I don't know, who we need to know more than. Always think
Mm-hmm.
we need to know more. We don't have
Mm-hmm.
enough information, or we don't have enough this or that,
It's
or
that giving away our authority.
mm-hmm. I'm like, you know enough. If it's a thing that is really on your heart for a long time to do, and it's an area that you feel competent enough to start a business in, then I'd really want to know, well, what's keeping you from going forward? And then dismantling that to then help that person set themselves free to go out and pursue that thing.
That's a really big thing, is that nothing happens until you take the first step.
Nothing happens.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing happens if nothing happens.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And I would say that you're never ready. You never feel ready enough. So until you take that first step, whether it's answering that question and saying, you know what, I don't feel ready, but I'm going to take a step and see what happens. And then seeing what that next step looks like.
And seeing what the next step is. And maybe the next step, if you feel you need more information, is to go gather information.
Mm-hmm.
Where can you get that information from? Who can you reach out to? Who can support you? Who can help you fill whatever gap you might have? Find those people, be in community with them. You run a community of business women, whether it's, joining a community
Mm-hmm.
of business women so that you can learn from others. Because here's the thing, whatever it is that you're doing, it might not be novel at all. And someone else has done it.
Mm-hmm.
Someone else has information that they can share with you about how to do it and where to get assistance or where to get more information. Whatever it is, somebody out there has some answers for you if you still have questions.
That is something that is so huge. And, ever since the launch of, large language models, ChatGPT, um, Claude, Anthropic's Claude, I have been of the mindset that as AI technology advances, community and human connection are going to become more and more important. It's going to change the way our economy grows, in my opinion. And I think that that's one of the things that women can do incredibly well that we haven't leveraged nearly enough is building those networks, building community, really starting to bridge connection to lift each other up and help each other succeed.
Community is very important for entrepreneurship. As an
Mm.
entrepreneur, I'm sure you know, and women in your community, it can be very lonely.
Mm-hmm.
It can be very, very lonely. And if you are sitting there thinking that you have to have all of the answers and you have to know everything on your own, then you will never get started and you'll never keep going, because you also need the community to tell you that those things that you're feeling, they're normal. I've felt them, whether it's fear, trepidation, feeling like you're going to give up, whatever it is. They'll be like, "Oh yeah, I've been there before. I know exactly
Mm-hmm.
that feeling." And that it's just that. It's a temporal feeling. You'll be
Mm-hmm.
fine. You'll move through this difficult phase, and we can help you with whatever it is that you are going through now. You can find some support and answers someplace, and you will get through this. Because entrepreneurship, it's not smooth sailing. It's just a
Mm-hmm.
series of ups and downs, and you're constantly thinking and pivoting and figuring out how to move past every new challenge, because every new stage of growth in your business it brings new challenges, and it requires a new and different version of you.
A
And
hundred
it's your
percent.
ability to really flex and grow into what is needed of you at each and every stage of your growth. And that's really the bedrock of the Unbreakable Founder, that you're evolving. And it's
Hmm.
you evolving, right? Not just your business acumen or your strategies, but you, the person, how you deal with challenges, how you deal with opportunities, how you
Hmm.
create community as you grow, because community is an important part of the growth process, because otherwise it's very lonely and very difficult.
Absolutely. And I think that the place where major businesses and business culture on a whole throughout history has failed is it hasn't actually looked at the business ecosystem as a community of people. It has looked at employees, team members, contractors as assets to the business, as a return on investment, and not part of the community. One of the things that we teach our clients is that until your team understands your vision, the mission behind what you do, they have no buy-in. They have no reason to want to row in the same direction. And I know for so many entrepreneurs, that's a huge frustration. Is like, why doesn't my company, why does my team care as much as I do? Well, you have to give them a reason to. You have to have them be part of the community that's rowing in the same direction.
Yeah, and that's why culture is such a big part of the whole process of growing a business as well. And
Mm.
that comes from you, the leader, the founder, the person at the top. You are setting the culture that the business matures into. And so that's why it's important for things like leading with curiosity and empathy and all of those things to be baked into the bedrock, the foundation of your business and how you lead, because everybody else is following the example that you are setting from the top. So if
Hmm.
you are not making those things priority for your business to feel like a family or like a community, you have to lay the groundwork for that. You can't
Hmm.
just expect somebody to walk in off the street and care as much as you. Like, let's be real, they're there for a paycheck. You have to give them a reason to feel differently about what you're building. Have them feel as if they're a part of it and they're contributing to it. And that's where the feedback loops are important, right?
Hmm.
Because people in your business, they see certain things from certain vantage points that you might not, especially if you have a customer facing business and you're not on the customer facing side. Those who are can give you feedback about customer experience that you might not have. So that's why it's important to keep that communication flow going, and so that you are getting all of that information back that can help the business, and that they feel it's easy and okay for them to give you that type of feedback, and that feedback will be taken and implemented, and then that builds their confidence, right? To keep giving
Hmm.
those types of feedback. And like, oh yeah, I feel like this because I had this idea about this thing, or I noticed this thing, and I provided that feedback and it was accepted and it got implemented and things are now moving more smoothly. That's how you get buy-in. That's how people want to keep contributing and see themselves as a part of helping the business grow, because they're a part of building it. They're providing
Hmm.
feedback that's being listened to and being taken and implemented. And and sometimes those feedback makes their job easier, right?
Hmm.
When they get
Absolutely.
implemented. And so now they feel like a part of the, like, okay, this is a rhythm here. We're a team, we're a community. And, everyone gets to contribute to the success of building the business.
And then we look at the number side of things as a business owner is one of the biggest costs is training new team members, replacing existing team members with somebody new. So why would you not want to build a culture that people want to stay and be part of? Not only does it make your life better, their life better, but it's better for your bottom line as well.
Yeah, it's a headache
Hmm.
and it's a major cost. And having to retrain, and especially if you're running a smaller business,
Hmm.
it requires so much to keep hiring and retraining. Um, the more you can do to maintain the people that you have, the better it is for your bottom line, and helping and having those people really feel like they're a part of building something is, and that, as you said, that's where the empathy really comes in. and the communication and the clarity. How are
Mhm.
you leading with them and bringing them with you and explaining, why are we doing things this way versus that way, right? Maybe they'll have a suggestion. Maybe neither of those two ways. Maybe this way,
Mhm.
because we've been getting this feedback from customers or we've noticed this. And if we maybe do it this way, it might lead to it. And like, oh, okay, didn't see it from that perspective. Let's think about that. And then now they feel like they're a part of this thing. They're not just expendable bodies that are just there to, carry out tasks, but they're there to think and provide and contribute to the growth of the business.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, this has been an incredibly fun conversation, and I'm sure we could nerd out on these things for a long time. But for the sake of podcast timing, I'd love to wrap it up with one final question before we get to how people can find you. So, and I'm going to steal this one from my partner, Christiana, because I think it's just so good and so on point for our conversation. So let's pretend that we are at an awards banquet and you are being awarded with a Lifetime Achievement Award for everything that you've done up until this point. What would you share with the audience, and what do you wish someone would have shared with you?
Hmm. Run that back, please.
Absolutely. What would you share with the audience? You're being awarded with a Lifetime Achievement Award. So you're looking back on everything that you've accomplished so far.
Hmm.
What would you want to share with the audience? And what do you wish someone would have shared with you?
I'm going to say I would thank the audience and specific people in the audience who helped me on my journey because none of us are successful on our own. I know we like to use the term self-made this or self-made that, but let's be honest, there are lots of people who helped you become self-made. Just as we talked about community, there are people in your community who helped you get there. So I would thank those people if they're in the audience and talk about the importance of community as a growth strategy and as a strategy for success. Because I obviously would not have achieved those things were it not for people who helped me get there. So gratitude, gratitude
Mm,
for community.
that's really powerful, and something that I think we all need to take plenty of time to do on a regular basis. So fabulous.
Thanks for that question. It's really something for me to think about.
It's one of those things that we our team does some interesting thought exercises like that from time to time, and I have always kind of wanted to try and align my life with, if I was looking back, would I be proud of it, and would I make 8-year-old Cerise proud? Because 8-year-old Cerise had some very definite ideas of who she wanted to grow up to be, and that's kind of my North Star. If 8-year-old Cerise would look at me and go, you know what, you're pretty cool, I like you, then I think I'm
Okay.
doing okay.
So 8-year-old Cerise is the standard bearer.
Yes. Yep.
Love that. Love that.
So,
Thank you for
all
sharing that.
right. So, as we wrap up, I just want to thank you so much, Michelle. This has been an absolute delight. Um, you have your podcast, Where's the Funding? WTF. I love that. You're an executive coach and the creator of the Unbreakable Founder. So, Michelle, where can people go to learn more about you?
First place I would say is to follow me on LinkedIn. So Michelle J. McKenzie on LinkedIn. And you can also follow my company page, which is Empowering Insights. And my website is empoweringinsights.com. So it's empowering-insights.com.
Perfect. Yeah, awesome. And we'll make sure to put those in the show notes for everybody so that they're easy to find, and all of the locations that we post this at. Thank you again so much for joining me, Michelle, today. It was an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Cerise.